Today will be part 3 of the last days of Samuel and the days of King David. And as always, there's some good stuff in here. A little action today, too, for you that like that sort of thing. We'll start with 1 Samuel, the 17th chapter, the first verse. 1 Samuel, the 17th chapter, the first verse. The Philistines gathered their armies together for war. They met at Soka in Judah. Their camp was between Soka and Azekah, at a town called Ephas Dammim. Saul and the Israelite soldiers also gathered together. Their camp was in the valley of Elah. Saul's soldiers were lined up and ready to fight the Philistines. The Philistines were on one hill. The Israelites were on the other hill. The valley was between them. The Philistines had a champion fighter named Goliath, who was from Gath. And little background on Gath will be found in Joshua, the 11th chapter. Hold your finger at the 4th chapter in Samuel 17. Joshua, the 11th chapter, the 21st verse, where it says, the Anakites lived in the hill country in the area of Hebron, Debir, Anab, and Judah. Joshua fought them and completely destroyed all the towns and their people. There were no Anakites left living in the land of Israel. The only Anakites who were alive were left in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. Continue at 1 Samuel, the 17th chapter, the 4th verse. He was over 9 feet tall. Yeah, he was NBA player, huh? At least he'd get junk, nothing else. He was over 9 feet tall. Goliath came out of the Philistine camp. He had a bronze helmet on his head. He wore a coat of armor that was made like scales on a fish. Think about that for a minute. Think about a fish's scales. The only thing that gets through there is the water that it allows. No more. That was ingenious for this time in history, to have a coat of armor made out of this. This armor was made of bronze, even better, and weighed about 120 pounds, 25 pounds. Goliath wore bronze protectors on his legs. He had a bronze javelin tied on his back. The wooden part of his spear was as big as a weaver's shuttle, or you have a rod. A weaver's shuttle is about so high. And that's the staff that weaves toward that thing. Anybody that has weaved anything knows more about what I'm talking about than I do at this point. But the spear's blade weighed 15 pounds. Goliath's helper walked in front of him, carrying Goliath's shield. Each day, Goliath would come out and challenge the Israelites, soldiers, with this cry. He would say, "Why are all of your soldiers lined up ready for battle? You are Saul's servants. I am a Philistine." Kind of like the ones that cry today about, "I'm an American." I am a Philistine. So choose one man, and send him to fight me. If that man kills me, he wins, and we Philistines will become your slaves. This slavery thing was a big thing back then, huh? But if I kill your man, then I win, and you will become our slaves. You will have to serve us. Lazy bunch back then, huh? They don't do any work, they just have slaves. Verse 10. The Philistine also said, "Today I stand and make fun of the army of Israel. I dare you to send me one of your men and let us fight." Saul and the Israelite soldiers heard what Goliath said, and they were very afraid. David was the son of Jesse. Jesse was from the Ephrathah family in Bethlehem, Judah. Jesse had 8 sons. In Saul's time, Jesse was an old man. Jesse's 3 oldest sons went with Saul to the war. The first son was Eliab. The second was Abinadab. And the third was Shammah. David was the youngest son. The 3 oldest sons were in Saul's army. But David left Saul from time to time to take care of his father's sheep at Bethlehem. The Philistine came out every morning and evening and stood before the Israelite army. Goliath insulted Israel like this for, again, we see 40 days. And one day Jesse said to his son David, "Take this basket of cooked grain and these 10 loaves of bread to your brothers in the camp. Also, take these 10 pieces of cheese for the officer who commands your brothers, group of 1,000 soldiers. See how your brothers are doing. Bring back something to show me your brothers are all right. Your brothers are with Saul and all the Israelite army soldiers in the valley of Elah. They are there to fight against the Philistines." A lot of fighting back then too. Peace doesn't come to this earth until God comes back to bring it. All of this shows us that in its own way. Verse 20. Early in the morning, David had another shepherd take care of the sheep while he took the food and left as Jesse had told him to do. David drove his wagon to the camp. The soldiers were going out to their battle positions. Just as David arrived, the soldiers began shouting their war cry. The Israelites and Philistines were lined up and ready for battle. David left the food with the man who kept the supplies. Then he ran to the place where the Israelite soldiers were and asked about his brothers. While David was talking with his brothers, the Philistine champion fighter came out from the Philistine army. This was Goliath, the Philistine from Gath. Goliath shouted things about Israel as usual. This time, though, David heard what he said. The Israelite soldiers saw Goliath and ran away. They were all afraid of him. One of the Israelite men said, "Did you see that man? Look at him. He comes out each day and makes fun of Israel. Whoever kills him will get rich. King Saul will give him lots of money. Saul will also let his daughter marry the man who kills Goliath. He will also make that man's family tree free from taxes in Israel." Way back then, they were doing that. Anybody that says this book is irrelevant today doesn't read it very much, do they? The one that kills Goliath, his family will be free from taxes in Israel. But it doesn't say how long. Forever? Like now? There's much here if you really want to dig into it. 26. David asked the men standing near him, "What did he say? What is this reward for killing this Philistine and taking away the shame from Israel? Who is this Goliath anyway? He is only some foreigner, nothing but a Philistine. Why does he think he can speak against the army of the living God, or Elohim?" So the Israelites told David about the reward for killing Goliath. David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard David talking with the soldiers and became angry. Eliab asked David, "Why did you come here? Who did you leave those few sheep with in the desert?" I have to say that I read that and say that I've heard that in the modern age too. He was belittling David here. Who did you leave those few sheep with in the desert? I know why you came down here. You didn't want to do what you were told to do. You just wanted to come down here to watch the battle. David said, "What did I do now? I didn't do anything wrong." You have to read between the lines, folks. This was a constant thing between these two, apparently. What did I do now? That means it happened before. I did not do anything wrong. I was only talking." He turned to some of the other people and asked them the same questions. They gave him the same answers as usual. Some men heard David talking. Then they took David to Saul and told him what David had said. David said to Saul, "People shouldn't let Goliath discourage them. I am your servant. I will go fight this Philistine." Saul answered, "You can't go out and fight against this Philistine. You're not even a soldier. Goliath has been fighting in wars since he was a boy." But David said to Saul, "There were times when I was out taking care of my father's sheep that wild animals came to take some of the sheep from the flock. Once there was a lion, and another time a bear. I chased that wild animal, attacked it, and took the sheep from his mouth. The wild animal jumped on me, but I caught it by the fur under its mouth, and I hit it and killed it. I killed both a lion and a bear like that. And I will kill this foreigner, Goliath, just like them. Goliath will die because he made fun of the army of the living Elohim. Yahweh saved me from the lion and the bear. He also will save me from this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and may Yahweh Elohim be with you." Saul put his own clothes on David. He put on a bronze helmet on David's head and armor on his body. David put the sword on and tried to walk around. He tried to wear Saul's uniform, but if you remember, Saul was a little tall himself. The uniform didn't fit David. He tried to wear Saul's uniform, but David was not used to all those heavy things. David said to Saul, "I can't fight in these things. I'm not used to them." So David took them all off. He took his walking stick in his hand, and he went to find 5 smooth stones from the stream. He put the 5 stones in his shepherd's bag and held his sling in his hand. And he went out to meet the Philistine. The Philistine slowly walked closer and closer to David. Goliath's helper walked in front of him, carrying a large shield. Goliath looked at David with disgust. He saw that David was only a handsome, healthy boy. Goliath said to David, "What is that stick for? Did you come to chase me away like a dog?" Then Goliath used the names of his gods to say curses against David. That's the wrong thing to do. He said to David, "Come here, and I'll feed your body to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come to me using sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of Yahweh all-powerful, the Elohim of the armies of Israel. You have said bad things about him. Today Yahweh Elohim will let me defeat you. I will kill you. I will cut off your head, and feed your body to the birds and wild animals. And we will do the same thing to all the other Philistines too. Then all the world will know there is an Elohim in Israel. All the people gathered here will know that Yahweh Elohim doesn't need swords or spears to save people. The battle belongs to Elohim, and he will help us defeat all of you. Goliath, the Philistine, started to attack David. He slowly walked closer and closer toward David, but David ran out to meet Goliath. David took a stone out of the bag. He put it in his sling and swung the sling. The stone flew from the sling and hit Goliath right between the eyes. The stone sank deep into his head, and Goliath fell to the ground face down. So David defeated the Philistine with only a sling and one stone. He hit the Philistine and killed him. David didn't have a sword, so he ran and stood beside the Philistine. Then David took Goliath's own sword out of its sheath and used it to cut off his head. This is how David killed the Philistine. When the other Philistines saw their hero was dead, they turned and ran. The soldiers of Israel and Judah shouted and started chasing the Philistines. The Israelites chased them all the way to the city limits of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. They killed many of the Philistines. Their bodies were scattered along the Sharon. Sharon Road, all the way to Gath and Ekron. Now you somewhat know why the things that Nimrod were doing were so useful during this time. All these people did was fight each other for each other's stuff. 53. After chasing the Philistines, the Israelites came back to the Philistine camp and took many things from that camp. David took the Philistines' head to Jerusalem, but he kept the Philistines' weapons at home. Saul watched David go out to fight Goliath. Saul spoke to Abner, the commander of the army. "Abner, who is this young man's father?" Abner answered, "I swear I don't know, sir." King Saul said, "Find out who his father is." When David came back after killing Goliath, Abner brought him to Saul. David was still holding the Philistine's head. Saul asked him, "Young man, who is your father?" David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse from Bethlehem." Continuing in 1 Samuel, the 18th chapter, the first verse. Saul decided to take David with him. He would not let David go home to his father. After David finished talking with Saul, Jonathan developed a friendship with David. Jonathan loved David as much as he himself, so they made a special agreement. A lot of people have said some things about that agreement that are not biblical. I will not repeat them here. Verse 4, Jonathan took off the coat he was wearing and gave it to David. In fact, Jonathan gave David his whole uniform, including his sword, his bow, and even his belt. David went to fight wherever Saul sent him. He was very successful. So Saul put him in charge of the soldiers. This pleased everyone, even Saul's officers. David would go out to fight against the Philistines. On the way home after the battles, women in every town in Israel would come out to meet him. They sang and danced for joy as they played their tambourines and lyres. They did this right in front of Saul. The women sang, "Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed tens of thousands." I see where a little bit of upset will come there. Verse 8. This song upset Saul, and he became very angry. Saul thought, the women gave credit for David killing tens of thousands of the enemy, and they gave me credit for only thousands. A little more of this, and they will give him the kingdom itself. So from that time on, Saul watched David very closely. The next day, an evil spirit from Elohim took control of Saul, and he went wild in his house. That there is your first indication that this was not a spirit from Elohim. A spirit from Elohim gives you supreme control of yourself. You got to read the book right way if you're going to read it at all. If he went wild, this was not a spirit from Elohim. All of these different translations, the word used there was probably small G-O-D, and should have been a proper name, the right one. And these are the kind of mistakes that have thrown us off because we don't adhere closely enough to the protocols of these things. Anytime the spirit is of Elohim, you have control of yourself. Anything that goes wild within you and you don't have control anymore, that's some other spirit. The next day, an evil spirit from Elohim took control of Saul, and he went wild in his house. David played the harp to calm him down, as he usually did. But Saul had a spear in his hand. He thought, I'll pin David to the wall. It didn't do any good. The playing didn't soothe him as it always did. Saul threw the spear twice, but David jumped out of the way both times. Elohim had left Saul. Note that. Elohim had left Saul and was now with David. That's why it didn't work. That's why it didn't work. David was on Elohim's side, and that spirit knew it, and he wanted to take him out of there. Elohim had left Saul and was now with David. So Saul was afraid of David. Saul sent David away and made him a commander over 1,000 soldiers. This put David out among the men even more as they went into battle and returned. He did this another time. So with somebody else, I'll be onto that at another time. That won't be in this series. Elohim was with David, so he was successful in everything. Verse 15. Saul saw how successful David was and became even more afraid of him. But all the people in Israel and Judah loved David because he was out among them and led them into battle. When you're going to lead people, you got to be on the same level as they are. Otherwise, you're just up there directing people, and eventually they're going to come after you. One day Saul said to David, "Here is my oldest daughter, Merab. I will let you marry her. Then you will be like a son to me, and you will be a real soldier. Then you will go and fight Elohim's battles." Saul was really thinking, now I won't have to kill David. I will let the Philistines kill him for me. But David said, I am not an important man from an important family. I can't marry the king's daughter. So when the time came for David to marry Saul's daughter, Saul let him marry Adriel from Meholah. People told Saul that his daughter Michelle, that's how you pronounce that, Michelle, loved David. This made Saul happy. He thought, I will use Michelle to trap David. I will let Michelle marry David. And then I will let the Philistines kill him. He was on point. The wrong point, but he was on point. He wanted this to happen. Or that demon does, whoever it was. So Saul said to David a second time, you can marry my daughter today. Saul commanded his officers to speak to David in private. He told them to say, look, the king likes you. His officers like you. We've all heard this before. You should marry his daughter. Saul's officers said these things to David, but David answered, do you think it is easy to become the king's son-in-law? I am just a poor, ordinary man. Saul's officers told Saul what David said. Saul told them, say this to David. David, the king doesn't want you to pay money for his daughter. He wants to get even with his enemy. So the price for marrying his daughter is 100 Philistine foreskins. That was Saul's secret plan. He thought the Philistines would kill David for the crown jewels. That's just me talking. Saul's officers told this to David. David was happy that he had a chance to become the king's son-in-law. So immediately, he and his men went out to fight the Philistines. They killed 200 Philistines. David took these Philistine foreskins and gave them to Saul. He did this because he wanted to become the king's son-in-law. Saul let David marry his daughter Michal. He saw that Elohim was with David, and he also saw that his daughter Michal loved David. So Saul became even more afraid of David and was against him all the time. You read between the lines, you have already figured that out. But they pointed out to you here because they want you to follow the storyline truly. Verse 30. The Philistines' commanders continued to go out to fight the Israelites. But David defeated them every time. He became famous as Saul's best officer. Continuing in 1 Samuel, the 19th chapter, at the first verse. Saul told his son Jonathan and his officers to kill David. But Jonathan liked David very much. So he warned him, "Be careful. Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. In the field, go into the field and hide. I will go out into the field with my father. He will stand in the field where you're hiding. I will talk to my father about you, and I will tell you what I learned." Jonathan talked to his father, Saul. Jonathan said good things about David. He said, "You are the king. David is your servant. David hasn't done anything wrong to you. So don't do anything wrong to him. He has always been good to you. He risked his life when he killed the Philistine," talking about Goliath. Yahweh won a great victory for all Israel. You saw it, and you were happy. Why do you want to hurt David? He's innocent. There is no reason to kill him. Saul listened to Jonathan and made a promise. He said, "As surely as Yahweh Elohim lives, David won't be put to death." That tells you right there how much he did not believe in Yahweh Elohim. As surely as Yahweh Elohim lives, David won't be put to death. Verse 7. So Jonathan called David and told him everything that was said. Then Jonathan brought David to Saul, and David was with Saul as before. Once again, there was war with the Philistines, and David went out to fight. He defeated them badly, and they ran away. Later in Saul's house, David was playing the harp. Saul was there with his spear in his hand. Then an evil spirit from Yahweh Elohim. I think this is small g God here. And somebody put Elohim here. And they said it was an evil spirit from Yahweh Elohim. No. You got to get on top of these mistakes at some time in this book. And they're not mistakes in the book. They're mistakes in the translations in all these languages. And some of those things, after the languages were done, all of these translations came under the authority was of one church. I don't say which one. The Universal Church. If you don't know who that is, that's on you. Verse 10. Saul threw his spear at David and tried to pin him to the wall. David jumped out of the way, so the spear missed him and stuck in the wall. That night, David ran away. Saul sent men to watch David's house. They stayed there all night. They were waiting to kill David in the morning. But David's wife, Michal, warned him. She said, "You must run away tonight and save your life. If you don't, you will be killed tomorrow." Then Michal let David down out of a window, and he escaped and ran away. Michal took the household god. Michal took the household god. They still had idols in their homes. Under Saul. But I will show you why as you go through this. The book will show you why as you go through this. And he escaped and ran away. 13. Michal took the household god, put clothes on it, and put goat's hair on its head. Then she put the statue in the bed. Saul sent messengers to take David prisoner. But Michal said, "David is sick." The men went and told Saul. But he sent the messengers back to see David. Saul told these men, "Bring David to me. Bring him lying on his bed if you must, even if it kills him." The messengers went to David's house. They went inside to get him, but they saw it was only a statue, and that its hair was only goat's hair. Saul said to Michal, "Why did you trick me like this? You let my enemy escape, and now he is gone." Michal answered Saul, "David told me he would kill me if I didn't help him escape." Everybody is in on this some kind of way. That's what happens when people aren't in line with the will of Elohim. This is what happens. Everybody gets their own stuff intertwined with the stuff of Satan, and it's all the same and all wrong. Verse 18. David escaped and ran away to Samuel at Ramah. He told Samuel everything that Saul had done to him. Then David and Samuel went to the camps where the prophets stayed. David stayed there. Saul heard that David was there in the camps near Ramah. So he sent some men to arrest David. But when they came to the camps, there was a group of prophets prophesying. Samuel was standing there leading the group. The spirit of Elohim came on Saul's messengers, and they began prophesying. Saul heard about this, so he sent other messengers. Wrong message, huh? But they also began prophesying. So Saul sent messengers a third time, and they also began prophesying. Finally, Saul himself went to Ramah. Saul came to the big well by the threshing floor at Siku. He asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" The people answered, "In the camps near Ramah." So Saul went out to the camps near Ramah. The spirit of Elohim came on Saul, and he also began prophesying. He prophesied all the way to the camps at Ramah. Saul even took off his clothes. What? Naked in public? He lay there naked all day and through the night. So even Saul prophesied there in front of Samuel. That is why people say, is Saul also one of the prophets? There's a question about that, though, because he was naked. They didn't even have people on the stairs in the Egyptian house of worship, even couldn't look up their robes. Why was he naked here? He bald face was in the face of God with his nakedness. Go on to 1 Samuel, the 20th chapter, the first verse. Then David fled from Naioth in Ramah, and came and said before Jonathan, "What have I done? What is my guilt? What is my sin before your father, that he seeks my life?" And he said to him, "Far from it, you shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing, either great nor small, without disclosing it to me. And why should my father hide this from me? It is not so." But David vowed again, "Your father knows well that I have found favor in your eyes." And he thinks, "Do not let Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly, as Yahweh Elohim lives, and as your soul lives, there is but a step between me and death." Then Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." David said to Jonathan, "Behold, tomorrow is the new moon, and I should not fail to sit at the table with the king." That was their custom. At the new moon, everybody had a meal together. "But let me go, that I may hide myself in the field till the third day at evening. If your father misses me at all, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, for there is a yearly sacrifice there for all the clan. If he says good, it will be well with your servant. But if he is angry, then know that harm is determined by him." Therefore, deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of Yahweh Elohim with you. But if there is guilt in me, kill me yourself. For why should you bring me to your father? And Jonathan said, far be it from you. If I knew that it was determined by my father that harm should come to you, would I not tell you? Then David said to Jonathan, who will tell me if your father answers you roughly? And Jonathan said to David, come, let us go out into the field. So they went out into the field. And Jonathan said to David, Yahweh Elohim of Israel, be witness. When I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, or the third day, behold, if he is well disposed toward David, then shall I not then send and disclose it to you? But should it please my father to do you harm, Yahweh Elohim, do so to Jonathan, and more also, if I do not disclose it to you and send you away, that you may go in safety. May Yahweh Elohim be with you, as he has been with my father. As I am still alive, show me the steadfast love of Yahweh Elohim, that I may not die. And do not cut off your steadfast love from my house forever. When Yahweh Elohim cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. And Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may Yahweh Elohim take vengeance on David's enemies. And Jonathan made David swear again by his love for him, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. Then Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed, because your seat will be empty. On the third day, go down quickly to the place where you hid yourself when the matter was in hand, and remain beside the stone heap. But if I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I shot at a mark, and behold, I will send the boy, saying, go find the arrows. If I say to the boy, look, the arrows are on the side of you, take them, then you are to come. For as Yahweh Elohim lives, it is safe for you, and there is no danger. I say to the youth, look, the arrows are beyond you. Then go, Yahweh Elohim has sent you away. And as for the matter of which you and I have spoken, behold, Yahweh Elohim is between you and me forever. So David hid himself in the field, and when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat food. The king sat on his seat as at other times, on the seat by the wall. Jonathan sat opposite, and Abner sat by Saul's side. But David's place was empty. Yet Saul did not say anything that day, for he thought, something has happened to him. He is not clean. surely he is not clean. But on the second day, the day after the new moon, David's place was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan, his son, "Why has not the son of Jesse come to the meal, either yesterday or today?" Jonathan answered Saul, "David earnestly asked me leave of you to go to Bethlehem. He said, 'Let me go, for our clan holds a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to be there. So now, if I have found favor in your eyes, let me get away and see my brothers.' For this reason, he has not come to the king's table." There it is. Verse 30. Then Saul's anger was kindled against Jonathan, and he said to him, "You son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness?" That was as close as the stuff we say today as you can get without saying it.
Right.
31. For as long as the son of Jesse lives on the earth, neither you nor your kingdom shall be established. Therefore send and bring him to me, for he shall surely die. 32. Then Jonathan answered Saul his father, "Why should he be put to death? What has he done?" But Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him. So Jonathan knew that his father was determined to put David to death. And Jonathan rose from the table in fierce anger and ate no food the second day of the month. For he was grieved for David, because his father had disgraced him. In the morning, Jonathan went out into the field to the appointment with David, and with him a little boy. And he said to his boy, "Run and find the arrows that I shoot." As the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the boy came to the place of the arrow that Jonathan had shot, Jonathan called after the boy, said, "Is not the arrow beyond you?" And Jonathan called after the boy, "Hurry, be quick, do not stay." So Jonathan's boy gathered up the arrows and came to his master. But the boy knew nothing. Only Jonathan and David knew the matter. And Jonathan gave his weapons to his boy and said to him, "Go and carry them to the city." And as soon as the boy had gone, David rose from beside the stone heap and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed one another and wept with one another, David weeping the most. Then Jonathan said to David, "I gotta explain that. David weeping the most, because Jonathan at this point knew what was going to happen. And he also knew about the covenant with Yahweh. In that covenant, he died also. And he knew it. And he rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. 1 Samuel, the 28th chapter, the first verse. In these days, the Philistines gathered their forces for war. What else is new? To fight against Israel. And Achish said to David, understand that you and your men are to go out with me in the army. David said to Achish, very well. You shall know what your servant can do. And Achish said to David, very well. I will make you my bodyguard for life. Now Samuel had died, and all Israel had mourned for him, and buried him in Ramah, his own city. And Saul had put the mediums and the necromancers out of the land. The Philistines assembled and came and encamped at Shunem. And Saul gathered all Israel, and they encamped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. And when Saul inquired of Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh did not answer him. This time it was obvious. Did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. Then Saul said to his servants, seek out for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her. What he had just done, he outlawed this in all Israel, and he was doing it now himself. Who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her? And his servants said to him, behold, there is a medium at Endor. What was all that about putting the mediums and necromancers out of Israel? A bunch of rubbish. In case anybody doesn't know, mediums, necromancers, all of that is under the form of spiritism. Things such as tarot cards, palm readers, horoscopes, Ouija boards, all of these are modern attempts to practice forms of spiritism. They are dangerous links to the demonic realms, even if undertaken in a spirit of fun. That was one of the first things I did when we moved into this house. We found a Ouija board back there in the back. And I threw it out the back door. And the next day it was back inside again somehow. And I threw it out this time and threw it in the garbage can. It didn't come back. That was my little signal then that something is to this stuff. And I don't want any parts of it. Believers should have nothing to do with occult practices, even in fun. From these actions, we clearly see that Saul had completely lost all faith in Elohim. But no one has observed his actions at this point except himself. Verse 8. So Saul disguised himself and put on other garments and went, he and 2 men with him. And they came to the woman by night. And he said, divine for me by a spirit, and bring up for me whomever I shall name to you. Who just died? Verse 9. The woman said to him, surely you know what Saul has done. Now he has cut off the mediums and necromancers from the land. Why then are you laying a trap for my life to bring about my death? But Saul swore to her by Yahweh, as Yahweh Elohim lives, no punishment will come upon you for this thing. Then the woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? He said, bring up, somebody said it, Samuel for me. When the woman saw Samuel, in quotes, it wasn't Samuel. She cried out with a loud voice, and the woman said to Saul, why have you deceived me? You are Saul. The king said to her, do not be afraid. What do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see an Elohim coming out of the earth. He said to her, what is his appearance? And she said, an old man is coming up, and he is wrapped in a robe. And Saul knew that it was Samuel, in quotes. And he bowed with his face to the ground and paid homage. Then Samuel said to Saul, why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? Saul answered, I am in distress, for the Philistines are warring against me, and Elohim has turned away from me and answers me no more, either by prophets or by dreams. Therefore I have summoned you to tell me what I should do. And Samuel said, why do you ask me, since Yahweh Elohim has turned from you and become your enemy? Yahweh Elohim has done to you as he spoke by me. For Yahweh Elohim has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David, because you did not obey the voice of Yahweh Elohim and did not carry out his fierce wrath against Amalek. Therefore Yahweh Elohim has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, Yahweh Elohim will give Israel also with you into the hand of the Philistines. And note this, tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. That tells you two things. Saul was what? Samuel was what? Dead. And you're going to be dead tomorrow. And this was not Saul speaking. It was a spirit brought by the lower demons. Not any specific one. Any one of them could have done that task. It was just relaying a message. That was what all angels are supposed to do. And tomorrow you and your sons shall be with me. Yahweh Elohim will give the army of Israel also into the hand of the Philistines. Then Saul fell at once, full length on the ground, filled with fear, because of the words of Samuel. And there was no strength in him, for he had eaten nothing all day and all night. And the woman came to Saul, and when she saw that he was terrified, she said to him, "Behold, your servant has obeyed you. I have taken my life into my hand and have listened to what you have told me. Now, therefore, you also obey your servant. Let me set a morsel of bread before you and eat, that you may have strength when you go on your way." How did she know that he was hungry all that time? She did know some connections with the next world, but any connection that you dwell on from there is not from Elohim, and ultimately will not do you any good. Some people, just something happens, something happened, I will use that from now on. No. That's not a good thing to do. And once or twice, that thing might do you some good. But eventually, in time, it will turn on you. Don't use it at all. (23) He refused and said, "I will not eat." But his servants, together with the woman, urged him, and he listened to their words. So he arose from the earth and sat on the bed. Now the woman had a fattened calf in the house, and she quickly killed it. And she took flour and kneaded it, and baked unleavened bread on it. Then she put it before Saul and his servants, and they ate. Then they rose and went away that night. Continuing in 1 Samuel, the 30th chapter, the first verse. Now when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, and the Amalekites had made a raid against the Negev and against Ziklag, they had overcome Ziklag and burned it with fire, and taken captive the women and all who were in it, both small and great. In war, there is no rich and poor and all of that. They took everything that was not tied down and untied that. They killed no one, but carried them off and went their way. And when David and his men came to the city, they found it burned with fire, and their wives and sons and daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people who were with him raised their voices and wept until they had no more strength to weep. These were grown men. lot of stuff here if you can recognize it for yourself. Grown men weeping for their families. Verse 5. David's 2 wives also had been taken captive. Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the bitterness in their souls, each for his sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in Yahweh his Elohim. And David said to Abiathar, the priest, the son of Ahimelech, bring me the ephod. So Abiathar brought the ephod to David. And David inquired of Yahweh, shall I pursue after this band? Shall I overcome them? He answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake and shall surely rescue. So David set out, and the 600 men who were with him, and they came to the brook Besor, where those who were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men. 200 stayed behind, who were too exhausted to cross the brook Besor. They found an Egyptian in the open country and brought him to David. And they gave him bread, and he ate. And they gave him water to drink. And they gave him a piece of cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten, his spirit revived, for he had eaten bread, or he had not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Note that. And David said to him, to whom do you belong? And where are you from? And he said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite. It wasn't for them, huh? They didn't go by that. This was something else. This signal is something else. And my master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. What kind of master is that? Next. Wartime. They eat their sons during war. 14. We had made a raid against the Negev of the Sherethites, and against that which belongs to Judah, and against the Negev of Caleb. And we burned Ziklag with fire. Now he knew who they were. And David said to him, will you take me down to this band? And he said, swear to me by Elohim that you will not kill me. That one also is supposed to be God. They didn't go by that name back then. Swear to me by God that you will not kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this band. Rat him out, in other words. And when he had taken him down, behold, they were spread all over the land, eating and drinking and dancing, because of all the great spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines, and from the land of Judah. And David struck them down from twilight until evening of the next day, and not a man of them escaped, except 400 young men who mounted camels and fled. David recovering all that the Amalekites had taken, and David rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, whether great, small, or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything that had been taken. David brought all of it back. David also captured all the flocks and herds. And the people drove the livestock before him and said, "This is David's spoil." Then David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow David, and who had been left at the brook Besor. And they went out to David and to meet the people who were with him. And when David came near to the people, he greeted them. Then all the wicked and worthless fellows among the men who had gone with David said, "Because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except that each man may lead away his wife and children and depart." But David said, "You shall not do so, my brothers. What Yahweh has given to us, he has preserved us and given into our hand the band that came against us. Who would listen to you in this matter? For as his share is who goes down into the battle, so shall his share be who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike." And he made it a statute and a rule for Israel from that day forward to this day. Then David came to Ziklag. He sent part of the spoil to his friends, the elders of Judah. "Here is a present for you from the spoil of the enemies of Yahweh Elohim. It was for those in Bethel, in Ramoth of the Negeb, in Jatir, in Aror, in Sithmoth, in Ethmiah, Eshtimoa, and Rekal, in the city of the Jerahmeelites, in the cities of the Kenites, in Hormah, in Borshan, in Atak, in Hebron, for all the places where David and his men had roamed. Continuing in verse 31, 1 Samuel 31, and starting at the first verse. Now the Philistines were fighting against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. And the Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and his Philistines struck down Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. The battle pressed hard against Saul, and the archers found him, and he was badly wounded by the archers. Then Saul said to his armor bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through with it, lest these uncircumcised come and thrust me through and mistreat me." That's all they said there, and that's all I'll say here. Anybody that's been in war, that awful things happen to dead bodies in war. That's all I can say there. But his armor bearer would not, for he feared greatly. Therefore Saul took his own sword and fell upon it. And when his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, and he also fell upon his sword and died with him. Thus Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor bearer, and all his men on the same day together. This was prophesied 20 years before this. Verse 7, and when the men of Israel who were on the side of the valley and those beyond the Jordan saw that the men of Israel had fled and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned their cities and fled. And the Philistines came and lived with them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the slain, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. So they cut off his head and stripped off his armor and sent messengers through the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to the house of the idols and to the people. They put their armor in the temple of Ashtaroth, and they fastened his body to the wall of Bethshan. And when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose and went out by night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan. And they came to Jabesh and burned them there. And they took their bones and buried them under the tamarisk tree in Jabesh, and waited and fasted 7 days. The events of this chapter happened some 20 years after Saul first heard the announcement of judgment against him from the prophet Samuel. Not as that was really Samuel. If anyone, it was a demon sent by Satan. The dead don't come back or talk. See this clearly in Ecclesiastes 9, the 5th chapter. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. And they have no reward, no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Verse 6, their love and their hate and their envy, and Saul had plenty of that, have already perished. And forever they have no more share in all that is done under the sun. Perhaps Saul thought that time was on his side, because Elohim's announced judgment did not happen immediately. A lot of times we do that. We do something wrong and nothing happens. Nothing is going to happen. we keep doing it until something happens. And then what happened? But time was against him, as it is against anyone that repeatedly sins and they know better. Because in the 20 years since, his heart became more and more hardened against Yahweh, Elohim. And finally, he just let him go and let it happen. And eventually, as you know by now, with anybody else there, David became king. Any questions? Ruby?
Pastor, I'm somewhat kind of thrown off. After Saul and his sons were burnt, they had to travel. Why would they have the need to burn their bones if they were already dead and fast? What was the purpose of that?
They weren't going into the kingdom. Obviously, at that point, they had sinned too much.
But the fasting, what was?
That was the other side doing that.
Their rituals. Okay.
Yeah, I'm as much puzzled about that one as you are. Who were they fasting to? Their gods, small g.
Their gods. Okay, got it.
Sunday morning, the king had died.
Okay.
That was for.
Yeah, I mean, they burned them.
Yeah. Yeah.
The scripture where when you were reading in 1 Samuel, the 18th chapter, where it says, in verse 10, where it says that the evil spirit came from God, and I looked up those words. And it says a harmful spirit from God, and I looked up those words. And the word deity can mean any God, small g. It's a harmful spirit. And then I looked up where it says harmful spirit, 7451, and it talked about what that harmful spirit could be. And it went all the way back to human nature. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And Saul had a spirit of jealousy in him, which is evil in the first place. And then over and it talked about, it gave a lot of references to different scriptures about people with evil spirits or either negative spirits, and the one that stood out to me most is in Acts, the 16th chapter and the 16th verse. This was Paul. It says, as they were going to the place of prayer, we were met by a slave girl who had a spirit of divination and brought her owners much gain by fortune telling. It goes on to tell, she was demon possessed. And Paul rebuked her. And that's the same spirit that infested or infected or got into Saul. It was demonic, where it says that that God sent a negative spirit. That was a demonic spirit that he sent to Saul. And it didn't come from God. It came from a small g. So I just wanted to say that.
Dermot.
Pastor Curtis, speaking on that verse Malene was just talking about 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 10. I thought about an account in 1 Kings chapter 22, 19 to 23, when Micaiah the prophet was warning King Ahab. And it's an interesting account I just wanted to read. Then Micaiah said, Therefore hear the verse 19. Therefore hear the word of Yahweh. I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne, and all the hosts of heaven standing by, on his right hand and on his left. And Yahweh said, who will persuade Ahab to go up, that he may fall at Ramoth Gilead? So one spoke in this manner, and another spoke in that manner. And then verse 21, then a spirit came forward and stood before Yahweh, and said, I will persuade him. In verse 22, and Yahweh said to him, in what way? So he said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And Yahweh said, you shall persuade him and also prevail. Go out and do so. Verse 23, therefore look, Yahweh has put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets of yours, and Yahweh has declared disaster against you. So in thinking of that, I know that Satan is the ruler of over all the demons, but thinking in that situation, and also when Job, where Satan, came up before the throne of Yahweh and stuff, he petitioned Yahweh to do the evil that he wanted to do. So the demons may not be of Yahweh's host, but sometimes Yahweh gives them allowance or allows them to do certain things, to carry out certain functions. Is the thought that I was having from this.
Yeah, but only in the case where the person has already disconnected himself and left himself open for such a thing. Yep. That's why we have to stay in this book. There was some nuances there. Those nuances the world sees as distinctives of this thing against that thing. It's not that way. It comes together in a different way than they think it does. Anyone else?
Why do you think they fascinate bodies this well?
This no. The same way that they fastened their bodies to those crosses and left them on the hillside. Anybody that comes by that did this, all of them had what they did on top of it. And this was a little bit different because it was in one of their godly palaces, and that was against their God.
I just think it's interesting that the daughter had access to an idol when her father was the leader of Israel. How did they have access to it? Why was it in their possession? In their home, where she could actually use it to put goat's hair on and put on the goat. Like, why do you have these?
Yep.
You pray to
I was thinking the same thing when I read it, but it happened before.
Right.
Yeah.
Like me having a rosary.
Yeah.
Like, why do I
The
have
same
a
thing
rosary?
happened out in the desert with whose kids were that? Had the idols in the back? Yeah, Rachel. Yeah.
Her father's Laban.
Yep. Melina.
Also,
I'm sorry. You have to remember where Abraham came from. They had a shop that
They
sold
sure
items.
they made the
Yeah, they made them there and made money of them. Yeah, yeah. Money is always the lead. The money makers always sell.
It's so funny. I was not home the day that it's a little festival going on, and all of these
artisans.
artisans. So I'm walking, and I'm just looking to see what they have. I thought it was interesting. There was a woman. She had nothing but crystals, and she was so excited to tell me about it. Even with candles, she's like, "Look at the crystal on it. I need the crystal." So it was like, it was so big to have these crystals, and people were right there, to purchase. She was like, I took crystal on this, I put it, and I just kept on, like, idolizing crystals and thinking of what.
That's big out here. That's big out here,
It is witchcraft.
Ruby.
It's true with Sister Sandy, because there's a part of Indiana where they're so huge and they emphasize, and they put like signs like this, And they tell you what each crystal signifies and what power pulls out if you do it. And they says if you put it in your earrings and your necklace and your bracelets and your anklets, it will provide that energy that you're lacking. And the one who told me that was Reina. Because I said, Reina, where are these crystals? Oh, because it says this. Where did you get that? That's information that I've been learning and I've been hearing. And you reread those at the schools. Are like, you what? I said, yeah, they're telling us what these crystals do because of the science and because archaeologists found this, so they feel if they get this crystal, they will provide this energy that Mother Earth is giving. So I was just like, you know what? Don't tell me no more because and such. So I made sure, let me check to see if she's got anything like her ears. Good thing she didn't, but she was telling me. But they have a big store in Indiana. I don't remember exactly what town, but they provide
A lot of them, if you look into it.
Oh, wait,
Rashida?
Yeah, witchcraft is really big among my generation. A lot of millennials are leaving the church and they're going back to divination and witchcraft. Like I have a couple stories. So I was in Target maybe about a year or so ago, and I like to go to the book section. And so I'm looking at the books and what have you, and I was near the self-help section, and I was just kind of looking to see what the fiction was over there. And so all of a sudden, I was moving books around because I saw different books, and I was looking to see if they had one more book that was paperback and not hardcover. And when I moved it, it said the little manual for witches. It was basically like a witchcraft book. There was only one left. I'm like, oh, so that means people were really buying this. One left.
That's big out here.
And I'm like, oh, okay, wow, in Target? And then I remember when I was acting, I was in this show called Into the Empty Sky, and I think I was the only one who wasn't into like witchy stuff. Like they all had crystals and, oh, this is my amethyst, this is gonna keep me protected from danger and whatever. And so one lady, she was Polish, her name was Marjana, and she had, I forgot what it was, but she had the one that's supposed to help you get money. And she lost it, and she could not find it. I mean, she's like, it was in my book bag, and I need it because I have this audition coming up, and I need this stone, this crystal that's going to help me get it, and da-da-da-da. And so I wasn't going to look for it, but everyone else was looking for it. I went to the bathroom. But everyone else was looking for it. And she's like, oh, I know what I'll do. And I will never forget, she went outside, started sitting on the ground chanting, and then 15 minutes later, she went back and it was sitting in the closet on top of the coat rack. Now, everyone looked there. It was not there. But as soon as she went outside and started chanting, doing whatever voodoo that she does, it was right there, just boom. And she's like, when did this get here? We're like, everyone's like, well, we looked there. I'm like, this is some witchcraft stuff that I do not want to be around. But it's getting big. It's getting big.
Yeah, it's very big here.
They promote that witchcraft, I think that play Wicked about witches, and I mean, it's people just clamor to that thing, you know.
Everything in
The movie,
Disney, anything now, is all witchcraft.
Right there, she in the cartoons, it's always something.
they have subliminal messages all throughout Disney.
And that's why we have to be super careful. Oh my goodness.
Dwayne.
Sometimes these idols give you a reference vision when you're praying or anything with religion. That you have some kind of reference point in your mind of what it might look like. It's not true. I have a vision from Revelation, and I find it hard to connect with that in prayer. And I remember the song, "Pass Me Not, O Gentle Savior." That's not what's coming back.
Ruby.
Going a bit further, I just found this out on my niece Crystal, when my brother passed away. Now they're offering in certain areas a little crystal bottle where you could put the ashes of your loved one to bring you good luck and to make sure that the soul of that person is with them. So my sister said to me, hey Ruth, should I get a bottle for all of us? I said, are you crazy? You got mom and Nep's ashes in your closet. What did you want? He says, well, just to remember them. I said, get away from that. We told that to Nep, and then he died. And now that we're waiting for mom's ashes, we have it here. You want us to? I said, So my niece says, but Tia, it's okay. It's my dad, it's in good faith because she studied ministry to be like a priest. And I said, I don't think so. I said, if you guys give me anything, surely know that I'm going to the waters and I'm going to toss them out. And they got angry. Said, you would toss mom and brother's ashes in the water? I said, yes.
Somebody already has their spirit. Somebody already has their spirit.
Exactly.
You got ashes. That's all you got.
These are learned women, and,
Yeah.
and they
Learned it in what?
hear and think that this is what their comprehension of what death brings. I'm like, to me.
But really, that's all that's out here now.
Yeah.
He's getting hold of his planet again, and he is coming back to that temple in Jerusalem. Rashida.
Kind of piggybacking on what Brother Dwayne said about how people are praying differently now. Now they have this thing, and I only know this because friends are telling me, but now they have this thing called manifesting, where you're praying, but you're praying and visualizing what you want, putting out the energy to God, what you want to come back to you. So people are saying, oh, I manifested a husband, or I manifested a job. So basically it's just witchcraft that they use prayer and God.
Yep.
It's just confusing. It's a lot.
Same stuff. Same stuff, different day.
Oh, and they're praying to their ancestors now. We're doing that again.
Black people have always done that.
So is the Asian community.
I know about us. I don't know much about them. I have a friend I have to extinguish from my Facebook that has more and more of that stuff out there now about the ancestors, this and that, the other.
Tears at the table for people for years.
Jews still do it for Abraham every the spring feast days. They have a table, a chair placed for Elijah.
Yeah, Elijah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, the Seder.
Yeah.
They have a chair for Elijah.
Melina.
For his return.
What? That's that, I was reading something recently about missing children. And what these witches are doing now, they're making living sacrifices out of children that come up missing and they can't find them. They're offering them as sacrifices to their God.
The world is a strange place all of a sudden, and it's becoming more strange, but note this. The further back we look for stuff, it's all in here. Nothing new under the sun.
Yeah, that's why I don't think it's any stranger. I just think that we have more.
It's more open.
We have cameras. We have camera phones where we're able to see things that are happening that we didn't see before. People are more open about their evil now, but I don't think it's any more or any less.
No.
I just think we have more transparency. People don't.
Yeah, more cameras, more cameras, more stuff.
Yeah, they got kids.
Used to be a time.
Off the street, you know, a little girl got away. Fortunately, she got away. She fought and got away. But a lot of them don't get away.
So I just think we have more access to what's going on.
More we have a 24 hours news cycle now.
Exactly. So we know it's.
And used to be in the news cut off at like 12 o'clock or something.
The
And
national anthem.
Yeah.
And your teeth going off.
and that pattern they have, that pattern, test pattern. Yeah. Everyone was different, but basically.
That's 24 hours.
But the thing is now, they've got 24 hours a day that they got to fill up with something. And whose news waves are they anyway?
Right.
And his fills up with his stuff.
That's right.
And all of a sudden, it's all about witchcraft, and changing your sex day to day and all of that, and all of the stuff that Satan brings up to puke up to the rest of us.
You mentioned those.
Rashida.
You understand what I'm just.
Probably so, but no, go ahead.
Jonathan and,
Oh,
Yeah.
They tried to.
Yeah, they've tried that for
Tried to
years.
make it seem like Jonathan and David were.
yeah.
Oh,
But-
yeah.
Yeah.
They were homosexuals. They were good close friends.
That's all.
Did it, right,
They tried to do that with John and Christ,
Mm-hmm.
They sure did.
because
Yep.
he played on his book.
Stupid. But I was watching a documentary from the Daily Wire called "What Is a Woman." I know I wrote it as the Daily Wire too, but I wanted to see this because basically this commentator, what he's doing is he's just going around and just saying, "What is a woman?" Like what is a woman? And no one could answer it. No one could answer what a woman was. They were like, "Oh well, it's whatever a person wants to be. A woman is it's fluid." And he's like, "No, just tell me what is the Oxford Dictionary's definition of a woman?" And they're like, "It's whatever you want it to be." And no one could tell him what a woman was. He went to a tribe in Kenya in Nairobi, and they're like, "A woman is a female who has one chromosome." Like they knew in Kenya, they're like, it's a female human being. Like that's a woman who has one chromosome. She has a uterus and gives birth, and and it's different than a man who has two chromosomes. Like they knew, but here in America, what do you think a woman is? It's whatever you. I mean, he went everywhere.
Melina
It was
first.
very deep.
What's sad is, and I was watching the news, one of the actresses or actors or whatever, I'm gonna let my child pick its own gender.
Oh.
Now, what do your child have between their legs? But you gonna let them pick their own gender?
They say that gender
More-
and sex are separated. They're not the same. That your sex is chosen for you, but your
The
gender
better question is, what have you got between your ears?
Nothing. The parents don't have nothing between their
They're blind.
when they make a when they make a comment like that. Homewood too.
Most people are. A lot of people are.
It's sad. It's sad.
And it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse.
Then they said these kids that have gender, what do they call them?
Gender reveal.
Whatever they call them. The boys.
Transgender, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
They can go into the girls' bathroom or vice
I
versa.
addressed that too.
But I think a lot of those things, they just doing it because they want to
Mm-hmm.
sexually exploit somebody.
Ruby.
Ray and I like watching Jeopardy,
I do too.
and I'm not sure if you've seen it, Melina. 2 days ago, a person came up because he wanted to be part of the Jeopardy, and it was a guy with a mustache and a small beard, but he was dressed in a woman with a bob, cut hair, pearl earrings, and a pearl necklace. And the guy said to you, because it says so-and-so.
What are
tell me
your
about
pronouns?
husband, So he
Yeah.
says, tell us a little bit about you. So he goes, well, I am a different gender. And he was trying to explain. And CJ was going like this. Like, Lord, would I get myself into? And he looked so disgusted. And when he had stopped, he realized he had stopped talking because he was still staring at
Say
it like
Jack is
this.
on Wheel of Fortune.
Okay, what's his name? The one in
you're talking about Jeopardy?
The new
yeah,
guy.
Jeopardy. What's his name?
Was Trebek alive?
Trebek.
No,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, so it was a playback. So he was going like this, and the guy had stopped her. He turned. Trebek was just looking at him like, I don't know what he was thinking. He was saying, "My Lord, what did I just gonna get myself into? I just had this guy enter my show, and I don't even know how to talk to him, or her, or it."
Well, they have one on Jeopardy. Its name was Amy.
Amy?
Yeah, and Amy won big, and then they announced her marriage, and Amy is supposed to be a woman, but Amy is marrying a man, or Amy is supposed to be is a man,
But
but
dressed as a
dressed
woman.
as a woman, but it's getting
Married
ready
to
to
a
get
woman.
married to a woman. So it doesn't know what it is.
But with the Daily Wire, what was funny is because they released this documentary online through the app, and it was hacked into, people couldn't watch it, all these hackers were making sure that there was so much traffic and spam mail going into the site that no one could watch. He's like, that's how we know we're doing something right, because they keep spamming us so people can't actually see it. It's really deep, and it actually talks about how they're indoctrinating children in the schools to be this way.
Yes.
And how it's
Big time.
starting with the teachers.
Mhm.
And basically, even the man said, again, he kept on saying, what is a woman? Just tell me what a woman is. Like, and they say, why do you want to know so badly? He said, because I want to know the truth. And you guys are not dealing with the truth. You're dealing with thinking that your feelings are reality, but they're not reality. He said the reason why, like when people, like anthropologists do those archaeological digs and they find bones, the reason why they're able to see if it's a woman and what time she dies is because it's in
Physiology.
hardwired in your DNA. Like your bones reveal what sex you were. So you can't lie to me and say, oh, I'm this, when your actual body, your DNA, your genes, your
Chromosomes or
everything, even your what your bone material is made out of, the tissue in your bones, it reveals what you are. I just want to know the truth. And they said, well, we can't answer that. Just something, what is a woman?
That's like what I say about once a month. Same physiology, same psychology.
It's really deep. It's scary because these children are...
I feel sorry for people with kids in school
That's
nowadays.
what I was going to
If
say.
you take a million
Can't
cells
you prohibit them
from a
from
million
teaching
women
your child
and
that?
clone them, you will come up with a
Well, then I
million
have to
female
go
babies
through.
every time.
Yeah.
And then they're also not talking about how a lot of people are changing their sex back to what they were, or trying to. There are so
Big-
many numbers, but they're not talking about
That's
that.
big in Europe now because so many of them jumped on the thing early and in their teens, and all of a sudden they get to be 18 and I know what I am now. It's not this. Jump back.
Well, you know,
Mhm.
these are, I'm sorry, genuinely, I'm sorry.
I'm done.
The niece or Bible study talked about her niece who was gay. And when he said she always tried to get to her when she would go to Louisiana, and she never get to her, you know, but she was always doing something that she was never, but she wanted to talk to her and tell her it was wrong. And she said, and she was like that for years. And then when we said that someone at church told her that she was going to go into the lake of fire and burn. And this woman totally changed and went back to being a woman and leading this way of life. And Denise said, someone told her, and I said, Denise, maybe you would have told her in a different way.
Right.
And she wouldn't be able to receive
Accept it.
But somebody else told her that she received it and she changed her life on the spot. You know, to go back to being a woman. I thought that was amazing. And that's a lot of that is going on.
It is.
Remember that one.
Like there was a video I was watching, there's this show that I watched called Jubilee, where basically it's two different people from two different backgrounds kind of having a conversation. And it was a person who was transgender but went back to their original sex, and then someone who's actually transgender now. And she's the one who went back to her original sex, she's Christian now. She said, I realized that I was blind, and actually her therapist told her to do it. To become a man, and then she's like, no. And then after she found Christ, yeah, it's deep. And so the guy that's a transgender now, he said, well, I was born this way. I know that. And she said, that's why you need to be born again. She said, that's the purpose of being born again, because your feelings, your heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. Who can know it? And it was amazing how this person who had gone through this and completely went back to who she was. It was incredible. And she's like, you know what, I'm not telling you this in hate, I'm telling you this in love, because I've been exactly where you are. I was blind once before too. But now I find the appreciation in being a woman. I find the appreciation in the way that God made me. But you have to have that relationship. But you cannot go by, oh, I was born this way. You must be born again. That's the purpose. It was really deep.
Yeah.
But they're not talking about that. No one's talking about that.
Yeah, they won't because it doesn't fit the narrative. There is a narrative, and it's his.
And it's a lot of money. It's all this money is going to big farmers.
Yeah, because if you look at it, the people in any field have the biggest salaries are always a little, yeah.
Really huge. That's true.
Do the research. I did. It's almost as if he pays you a stipend for being that way out front. Used to be big old closet. Everybody was in there.
Now you get bonuses for joining in.
I saw the funniest. It wasn't funny, but it was a commercial yesterday for the this new wine they've got out, and these two guys came up and they were out in the closet. I mean, out in the open, and then they went into a closet,
Yep, I see.
and then the big poster comes up. Show your pride
Yep,
in this wine.
and the
This.
top of the table though is the color, flag, rainbow.
Yeah. Yeah,
The court.
the flag in the background. Yep.
They make a big issue of it now, they get a parade and all that stuff.
They used to do the gay balls. And the young ones and the children are all happy, not realizing all that confusion.
Mommy number one and mommy number two.
Yeah.
Yep. We got to cut it off.